want to speak to you tonight about the need for us to lower the temperature in our politics. And to remember, while we may disagree, we are not enemies.
The discord and division in our society must be healed. We must heal it quickly.
Welcome back. 2 weeks ago, political violence once again took center stage in the United States after former President Donald Trump was shot while campaigning in Pennsylvania. Since then, politicians on both sides of the aisle have called for a change in tone in Americans' political conversations. Here to talk about it is former U.S. Representative from Wisconsin, Reid Ribble. Congressman, thanks so much for being here. Now, you're a Wisconsin Advisory Council member for Keep Our Republic. That's a nonprofit focused on election integrity, strengthening trust in our democratic process. Tell me about your work there.
The organization was set up really a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, actually, to help in what we'll call the battleground states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Georgia, with this whole idea centered around that the elections are not accurate, they're not fair, they don't work, things like that. And it's really whether you're going to vote for the Democratic nominee, who we're not sure exactly who there's going to be, but maybe Vice President Harris, or whether you're going to vote for Donald Trump. It doesn't really matter because we've got Republicans and Democrats working on this. What we want is we want every single American to vote that's eligible to vote, because the more people that vote, the more sure you can be of the result. But if people doubt that the elections are safe and secure, why would they vote at all? And so we're working with county clerks in Wisconsin, for example, doing a lot of training about the election process, what happens after they're done with their count and things like that. And then doing public awareness things that if you don't trust politicians, at the bare minimum, trust your neighbor who's that elderly person sitting at the polling station taking your driver's license and address down.
So when you're having those conversations, what are the concerns that you hear from people when it comes to election integrity?
Yeah, it depends on who. If we're talking to a county clerk or a poll worker, they're mostly afraid of violence. They're afraid of being threatened and concerned about things like that. If you're talking to a voter and a Republican voter who's heard repeatedly that the elections are stolen if Donald Trump loses, we try to build back into them some confidence that, listen, it's probably somebody sitting in the pew next to you at church that's actually doing the counting. It's not being counted by the politicians anywhere, so trust them. And then if it's a voter that really does trust the elections, we try to engage them to talk with their friends and neighbors and encourage them to vote and encourage them that the elections will be counted accurately.
Okay, so let's talk about 2024. If Trump loses, are you concerned about election now becoming a real issue for us again?
I am. I mean, former President Trump has said repeatedly that if he loses, it's because the election was rigged. This is the exact same language that he used in 2020. And so you certainly would have to question whether or not citizens who really believe that the elections are rigged will act out in the way that they acted out on January 6th. There is one difference, though, that gives me some confidence, Braden, and that is that this year we don't have a lot of these extra rules that are put in place because of COVID. If you remember back in 2020, we're right in the throes of COVID. We wanted people to feel safe to vote, but a lot of people didn't feel safe even going outside their homes. And so a lot of those rules have gone away, and we're back to a more normal circumstance. And so we're hopeful that because of that, people will have more trust and confidence in the election already.
Democrats say election denial and Trump's tone is what's driving this division. Republicans have called out Democrats for their rhetoric about how another Trump presidency could bring an end to democracy. Who's at fault here? Is this all of us?
Generally speaking, this is a societal problem. And this is not new to America. I mean, I'm in my late 60s, and so I remember my earliest remembrance of a president was when President Kennedy was assassinated. I was in 3rd grade, and you had Robert Kennedy assassinated, Martin Luther King assassinated, George Wallace was shot, Gerald Ford had an assassination attempt, Ronald Reagan was shot. Back in the 60s and 70s, it was much more common to have this type of violence. And then there was this period of about 45 years where it was pretty calm. And now we've got this new level of rhetoric that's driving some of the hatred. I've often said to my politician friends that the American people are angry and they want you as a politician to be as angry as they are. But they're not always able to identify what they're angry about. They're just mad. And that's a really dangerous place to start. And so I think we collectively as Americans have to start viewing each other as fellow citizens whose viewpoints are worthy of hearing out, even though we might disagree.
How much of this is up to us and how much of it is up to our politicians?
I think it starts with the politicians, because if they actually start treating each other decently and start respecting each other, you'll see the temperature go down. That's what leaders do. What leaders shouldn't be doing is dialing that up. So you do have a lot from the Democrat side talking about if Trump wins, democracy is over. And if you have on the Republican side that if the Democrats win, then the country's going to fall apart and World War III is going to break out. Donald Trump just said that last Friday. And so that type of language starts to inflame people. And the further to the political perimeters people are, the more embedded in the base of their parties they are, they believe that rhetoric. And we need that more bright, shining star type of language talking, that America's the shining city on the hill that is more aspirational and inspirational rather than fear mongering.
And of course, we've heard both Trump and Biden say they'll work on lowering the temperature. Did you watch the RNC? Did you hear that message from Trump and the other speakers at the RNC?
No, we're not seeing the temperature go down at all. That was a very brief blip in the screen. I mean, when President Trump got up to speak at the RNC right there in Milwaukee, and by the way, what a great way to show off the city. But he started from the kind of a position of humility about having that shot come so close to killing him. And I thought, boy, if he would just stay in this zone, he would be fine. But he stayed there for about 15, 20 minutes, and then off he went on kind of his grievance campaign about virtually everything he's mad about. And so that didn't really help. And in fairness, Vice President Harris also needs to take that rhetoric down a little bit. And there's a fair amount of agreement between the two. Quite frankly, they agree on let's impose a bunch of tariffs on the American people and raise the taxes that way. They both agree on that. They're both kind of anti-free market candidates, and so they have philosophies that are very, very similar. And maybe they should work for finding common ground and seeing if they could peel off some voters from the other side based on those policies rather than demagoguery.
Yeah, I mean, if an assassination attempt like this doesn't do it, what do you think will make them lower the temperature?
I don't think they will lower the temperature because they believe that it works. And yet it didn't work in 2020. It didn't work. But you want to know when it did work for the most part? Was in 2022 at the midterms. And so the two presidential candidates were out of it, and local members of the U.S. House of Representatives and state assemblies and state senates, they actually had to talk about issues to try to win the race. And so we know that elections can be free and fair and work and accepted when that rhetoric is toned down. And so we need to see more of that and less of the alternative.
Congressman Ribble, thanks so much for being here. We'll be right back after this.